Doctor, I did say you ought to be looking for the Spy Master. What I meant to say is that you should be looking for the Spy Master.
You can't be.
Oh, I very much am. Oh, this is a great Master performance. He has a lot of John Sim in him, but he's written like the classic Masters. He even has the tissue compressor unit. Best twist in one of the best twists ever.
I agree. It is.
Episode 2 has an even bigger twist ending. 2 of the best twist endings ever.
Definitely agree with you on that, Master.
Hey, Yaz, could I have your sister's number, please?
Ryan, how many times I'm not giving you my sister's number?
Oh, come on.
You're my mate, I don't want you dating my sister.
I could be your brother-in-law. I'd be a good brother-in-law.
No!
Is this because you kind of have feelings for me?
Well, I might have a few feelings for you in these 2 series. And again, quite a few fans think I have a few feelings for the Doctor. This is only theorised, maybe implied. We'll find out for certain in Series 13. Maybe. But the point is, I just don't want you dating my sister, if that's okay. I might like you in that same way, but even if I didn't, I still don't want you dating my sister.
Yeah, but we could still be mates, even if I did date your sister. And like I said, I could still be your brother-in-law. I'd be a very good brother-in-law.
Hey, come on now, you two. Back to work. Back to being spies. Don't make me do the old soft shoe shuffle.
Okay, Grandad. In all honesty, we only had that bit in so we could have that joke in. God, I love Bradley Walsh.
Hello, ladies and gentlemen, Nick here, and welcome to my Revisitation review of Doctor Who, Series 12, Episodes 1 and 2, Spyfall, Parts 1 and 2. Because, like the end of time, we've got a 2-parter with the same title for the second time in the revised series' history. And funnily enough, one of these episodes airs on New Year's Day, just like the end of time. So, just like 2010, 2020 starts off with a episode of a story with the same title for both episodes. Just like a classic series story, we've got an overarching title for one story and it's a part 1, part 2, as opposed to 2 separate titles for the same story, or 3 in the case of the series 3 finale. In this episode's case, it's part 1 that airs on New Year's Day 2020, as opposed to The End of Time, which was part 2 on New Year's Day 2010, kickstarting the 2010s. Now we've got Spyfall Part 1, kickstarting the 2020s. Also, Part 1 is not a New Year's special. It is Episode 1 of Series 12. It's not like Resolution or Revolution of the Daleks, where they're special episodes broadcasting on New Year's Day. It is Episode 1 of Series 12. It just so happens to broadcast on New Year's Day, a bit like the first episodes of Sherlock Series 2, 3, and 4, whilst Resolution and Revolution of the Daleks are more like Sherlock the Abominable Bride. So the plot of Spyfall is that the Doctor and her companions are recruited by MI6 to help them in an investigation into why spies are being assassinated mysteriously by what seems to be extraterrestrial forces. On their way to MI6, they are attacked themselves by someone hacking the MI6 systems, and later the head of MI6, C, played by Stephen Fry, who, may I add, was very underused, criminally underused even, in this story. I thought he was going to play at least a bit more of an important role, and yet he was just shot and killed, and he didn't really have an awful lot of screen time. So, and that was And that's an opinion I've had since the first time I've seen this episode. So, yeah, Stephen Fry was criminally underused. The Doctor and her companions manage to escape these creatures, but it seems that they are able to get into the TARDIS. So the Doctor uses scagrography, I believe, to unravel a picture from an old friend to try and find their location, whilst Ryan and Yaz trying to follow up the one lead that they do have in the investigation, and that is to a media and tech mogul, Daniel Barton, head of Vor, which is basically like Google. It's a web search thing, a tech company, and lots of other stuff. And Barton is able to use technology and media to his advantage. So Yaz and Ryan, pretending to be a journalist and photographer respectively, go to try and investigate Barton. Meanwhile, the Doctor and Graham meet up with the Doctor's friend O, played by Sacha Dhawan, and they try to find out what's going on with these creatures called the Kasavan, as they're later called. And we try to find out what's going on. It turns out the Kasavan are alien spies from another dimension who are coming to this dimension and are spreading themselves across Earth over multiple time periods. And they're taking out spies once they start to be detected by spy organizations. And it seems like Daniel Barton is involved in this, including allowing himself to be tested 7% Kasavan to test that their grand plan of absorbing everybody and turning them into basically hard drives for information stuff. Apart from a couple of individuals like Barton, the humans are being turned into hard drives to store information. That's basically what Barton and the Kasavan are up to, but there's one more person in charge of them all. The Spy Master, as O puts it. There's someone in charge of the Kasavan spies and the Kasavan plot and Barton. There's this one big boss, and it turns out that the Spy Master is in fact O, who is actually the Spy Master. O reveals himself to be none other than the Master. Yes! And Sacha Dhawan, in my opinion, is probably the best of the new series Masters after Derek Jacobi. As mentioned in my television Masters ranking on the Universal's channel, go check it out if you would like to. I'll leave a link in the description below. And at the end of this episode, the Master blows up the plane that the Doctor and company are on, and it starts crashing, but the Doctor is taken away by the Kasavian to their alternative universe. And that ends the epic part 1. I'll go more into detail about the stories later, but I'll just get these plot descriptions out of the way. Part 2 sees the Doctor arrive at the Kasavan universe, but they've been tapping into the dreams of this woman called Ada Gordon, who would later become Ada Lovelace when she marries Earl Lovelace, and be one of the earliest people to come up with what would become the computer alongside Charles Babbage, who also appears in this episode. Ada Lovelace is a key part of the Kasavan plan, so they've been kind of coming to her dreams for years, and this is one of these cases. So the Doctor goes back with her and arrives in the 19th century. Note, 3 years before Queen Victoria was crowned. This is technically the reign of William IV. We're kind of in that gap between Georgian and Victorian Britain. The Doctor has to try and find a way to get back to the 21st century without the Master getting in the way, as he comes after her to try and get rid of her, whilst Barton tries to deal with the companions, who he makes fugitives due to them hijacking the plane, so he says. And the companions have to go on the run, very Sound of Drums-esque, from Daniel Barton, and they have to try and find and stop him from doing his thing, whilst the Master tries to torment the Doctor in the past. The Doctor and Ada manage to get to 1943 in Paris, to be precise, where they meet Noor India Khan, I believe, who also helps them out and helps the Doctor send a fake message that gets the Master out of their way for a bit before the Doctor recruits them to help her sort the situation out. Using the Master's own TARDIS, the Doctor is able to, off-screen, make a default setting in the Glass Lady statue that's being passed throughout time, from Ada's time to Daniel Barton's time. And it's a fail-safe that's in order to prevent the Kasavan plan from succeeding. It is done off-screen and it is kind of done in exposition and a quick wrap-up, but it is an effective conclusion. And the Kasavan turn on the Master due to the fact that he was going to turn on all of them once his plan had succeeded. And what's also quite funny is that the Master had to wait around 70 or so years to actually get back to where he was in the plan. Because he was trapped in 1943 by the Doctor, and he had to wait until 2020 to complete the plan. So he had to wait about 70 years or so till he was able to get back. Well, maybe even 80 years, actually. Almost 80 years. This allows him to have a wanted poster cameo in the Faceless One's animated episodes. I believe just in part 1, though, sadly, but the Roger Delgado Master and the Monk also have wanted poster cameos. Once the adventure is over, the Doctor goes back to Gallifrey to see what's happened after the Master suggests that she go back, and it turns out Gallifrey has been destroyed, and that it was the Master who did it, for unknown reason, but it has something to do with the Timeless Child. I'm sure that won't be important, will it? We'll get to it later. I'm sure there's other episodes later down the line that will be more important to that story arc. But it is a bit disappointing to see Gallifrey destroyed again at the time of broadcast, just over 6 years since it was brought back at the end of the Day of the Doctor in November 2013. So 6 years would be November 2019, and these episodes broadcast in January 2020. So just over 6 years, and it's destroyed again. That being said, whatever Chibnall would have done, he would have had the enormous task of following up from the stupid Hellbent, as the ramifications of Hellbent would be very difficult to tackle for a new showrunner, especially after Moffat just let Chibnall inherit it after not doing anything with it in Series 10. So Chibnall inherited the post-Hellbent consequences and stuff. So whatever he would have done with Gallifrey post-Hellbent, he would have had a mammoth task to do. And it's not like the planet is completely obliterated. It's just that it's been bombarded and nuked and everybody's dead, but the planet itself is still there, just about. And the Master destroying Gallifrey kind of does fit in character, and that's even before we know about what caused him to do so, and we'll find out more about that later. But that's for a later story. Let's get back to this two-parter. I mostly talked about the plot, so let's get to subjective and objective stuff. Subjectively, Spyfall is an epic story. This is a brilliant adventure as well. It's a great two-part story. Part 1 is a brilliant Doctor Who does James Bond-esque story, a James Bond homage. We haven't had a direct James Bond homage story before. We've had Doctor Who doing James Bond, with The Enemy of the World being, if Doctor Who did a James Bond story, and John Pertwee's Doctor being very much like James Bond, an action hero. Plus the 10th Doctor wore tux in a couple of episodes, and was even referred to as looking like James Bond in The Lazarus Experiment by Martha. And as you can probably tell behind me, I am a big James Bond fan. Not quite as much as Doctor Who. Doctor Who is my number 1 fandom. But James Bond would probably come number 2. And to be honest, if I was showrunning Doctor Who, I would probably have some Bondy elements in the series. My series would be very movie-esque. My Doctor would be very much an action hero or heroine. And I would try and write and or produce a couple of epic stories. Might even direct some if I'm lucky. Spyfall Part 1 is a template of what I would have actually liked to have done with a Doctor Who story at some point in the future. Or at least some elements would be in it, and other elements I can add later on. Part 2 adds a bit of the time travel stuff to it, and I'll get back to that in a moment. There are some stuff that they could have expanded more on and make it more of a Bond homage, like maybe some of those gadgets could have been expanded on a bit more, maybe the MI6 stuff could have been expanded on a bit more, but when it does the Bond homages, it's really great. The whole story isn't exactly a whole Bond homage, but when they have those homages in there, it is really great. My favourite scene of the episode is the bit where they go to Daniel Barton's party and they're all in tuxes and nice clothing, and we have a great version of the Me and My Mates track that was first heard in the previous episode, Resolution, and in this episode we get a version of Me and My Mates that kind of feels like it's a Bond-themed version of that track, and it is fantastic. I mean, Sega Nakanola's music in Series 11 was brilliant. Series 12, he's upped his game. He is fucking fantastic. He's not as good as Murray Gold, but he's still fucking fantastic. And Me and My Mates is probably my favourite track of his, so this rendition of that track, feeling very much like a Bond-themed version of it, is amazing. So, absolutely brilliant. And the climax is also fantastically scored. This guy deserved to succeed Murray Gold. Even if I think Murray Gold did better, then again, he did do 10 series. But Sega Nakanola is fucking awesome. Especially in these 2 episodes. It's just amazing tracks. Whilst we're on production side, cinematography Stunning, fantastic. Alongside the first 3 episodes of the last series, these are some of the greatest looking episodes. We've got 2 directors this time round. Part 1, I believe, is directed by Jamie Magnus Stone, but they also directed episode 6 in the same production block for some reason, and then they filmed episodes 2 and 3 in the same production block, directed by Lee Haven Jones. The former director would then later on to direct the finale, and the latter would direct the Revolution of the Daleks New Year special that would follow the finale. But yeah, it's a bit odd that they decided to split the story into separate blocks, and they went off to do Praxis first. But that doesn't stop the 2 styles from working really well with each other. Both directors seem to have a really good job in blending the 2 episodes together. I'm actually quite surprised that they decided to split Spyfall Parts 1 and 2 into these 2 production blocks. Maybe they should have started with Praxis, and then it would have made a bit more of a seamless transition. But it still pays off pretty well in the production standpoint, and it looks absolutely amazing. These 2 episodes are 2 of the most cinematic episodes Doctor Who has ever seen, and at a time period where a lot of these episodes are looking like they could be shown in the cinema, if they were bloody open, at the time of this review coming out, they will almost be open again. That's saying a lot. As for the story, I do think the story is slightly a bit busy. There's a few things that could have been ironed out, like some of the hints towards O actually being the Master and not quite being who he is. Maybe we could have a bit more of that sprinkled in part 1. And the Doctor solving the situation off screen with Ada and Noor. It could feel a bit tacked on for some people. I can understand that, and it could feel like a bit of a cop-out, and there should have been a bit more time for it. What's more, there's a lot of focus on Ada and Noor, but at the end of the day, they don't really have an awful lot to do. Ada does save the Doctor at one point from the Master with in a really cool bit where she fires the sting gun at the Master, and there's this great bit where this gentleman of the time says, "Oh, it's not made to be used by a young lady," and Ada responds with, "Nothing is, and yet I find myself perfectly capable of it." Fantastic. Absolutely fantastic. That guy can go and fuck off. The teamwork between the Doctor, Ada, and Noor is shown briefly on screen, and they do have a good rapport with each other, but as mentioned, they do solve the situation off screen and just talk about it. That is something the Chibnall era is suffering from. So much exposition, and I don't think Jodie Whittaker can quite do exposition as well as David Tennant or Peter Capaldi, for instance, and she is given probably even more than they ever got, apart from maybe in the Series 2 finale, but apart from that, I think Jodie Whittaker is just lambasted with lots of exposition, and, well, she's good at it, not as much as some of her predecessors, and it just gets a bit boring after a while. I mean, at least a bit tiring, especially when it's just, sometimes it's just her going on and on about something. Seriously, Chibnall, why don't you let some of the other characters have a couple of good ideas, a couple of brainwaves, and connect the dots so that they can do some of the exposition. It would help Jodie take a lot of the weight off her shoulders, and I think she would need that. She's playing the main character. She's going to have a lot on her shoulders. Having some of the exposition taken away from her and given to other characters could help. That's just an idea for Series 13 or 14. I don't know, maybe. Especially as we got 2 supporting historical characters who are teaming up to help the Doctor. They might do a few bits, but they're mostly just there. Speaking of stuff that could be improved on, the companions. Whilst the companions are great in part 1, but in part 2, whilst the actors continue to do a great job, and they did so in part 1 as well, they don't really do for an awful lot in part 2. They're just basically there because they have to be. And they kind of do a Sound of Drums situation where they have to go on the run, but not for long, and they try to follow Barton, but they know where he's going, but when they try to follow him, they end up at this other place, and they forget that he's going to this other place. Also, when Ryan and Yaz interviewed Barton in part 1, Barton told him that one of his favourite hobbies was flying due to not going away much abroad when he was younger. And then when they get to the private airport, Ryan's like, "How many planes does this one guy need?" Ryan, you were in the room when he basically gave you the reason. He's rich and he likes to fly as a hobby. Makes sense. If it was Grain that said the line, then yeah, that works. But Ryan, yeah. But in part 2 of the story, the companions are basically just there. They're just there because we need to have the companions do something. Although we do get one of the best moments of the entire show. Don't make me do the old soft shoe shuffle. Have I said yet how much I love Bradley Walsh? I'm not sure if I have. I fucking love Bradley Walsh as Graham O'Brien. He is out fucking standing. He's one of the best Doctor Who companion actors out there. Graham as a character could do a little bit more work, but he's still fucking awesome. And Bradley Walsh is even more fucking awesome. So, yeah. Loving Bradley Walsh as Graham. He's awesome. Tosin Cole and Mandip Gill also do really well as Ryan and Yaz, especially Mandip, who seems to be upping her game as Yaz, and the character also seems to be getting a bit more to do this series, which is something a lot of people weren't so happy about with Series 11. Even those who did like the series wanted Yaz to get a bit more development or at least do something, and we get a bit more of that this time around with her going to the alternative universe for a little bit in part 1 before coming back and kind of being a little scared by it, scared by the experience. So we got some good stuff, although some bad stuff is the fact that she's supposedly South Yorkshire's best probationary police officer, yet we hardly see any of her police officer stuff. After The Woman Who Fell to Earth, we just see her kind of restraining Charlie in Kablam and talking to Hannah in It Takes You Away, and maybe a few other mentions, but we don't really see her doing much as a policewoman stuff in that series, and we don't really see that much of it in this series either. So even though Yaz is supposedly the best probationary officer in the South Yorkshire police force, we hardly see it. And I don't think we'll see much of it in Series 13 either. We also start Ryan's new character arc of this series. Is he going to be able to get a basketball in the hoop by the end of the series? He has dyslexia, sure, but this doesn't really come up again until the finale. So, yeah, at least Graham's cancer thing comes back as a fear of his in Can You Hear Me? So, in short, the companions are done really well in the first episode, but whilst the actors do a fantastic job in the second, the characters aren't done as greatly there, and there's a few other nitpicks I mentioned, such as the Yaz probationary stuff. We also see Yaz's family briefly in these 2 episodes, but not much, and this is the last time we'll see her parents, though Sonia will be making one more appearance in Can You Hear Me? More on that when we get to that story. And as for our main protagonist and antagonist, well, Jodie Whittaker, this is her best performance as the Doctor so far. She is brilliant. Yeah, she gets all that exposition and she has to keep blabbing out it all of the time. But I think she's trying her damn best. And this is probably her best performance as the 13th Doctor at this point. We'll see how it goes later on down the series. But as of the first 13 episodes she has done, release-wise, she is probably at her best in these 2. As for the Master, Sacha Dhawan is just amazing. Just one scene, and he is my second favourite Master of the Revised series, and currently 3rd overall. That's just in one scene, at the end of part 1. Just one scene, and he's already better than Johnson and Michelle Gomez. No offence to either of them, they did really well as their Masters, and I enjoyed their Masters, but in one scene, Sacha Dhawan becomes my second favourite new series Master, and currently is my 3rd favourite Master overall, and that's before we even get to part 2 of this story, his 2nd episode. And it's just absolutely amazing in part 2, he's just so brilliant. He is written very much like Sim's Master, but not as over the top. I think he's trying to retain some classic elements within the Dhawan Master, but with the intensity and insanity of the Sim one, which makes him a pretty great balance between classic and revived Master. We'll see Sacha Dhawan's Master again at least one more time this series, but in this story, he's just amazing. He's absolutely brilliant. Whilst in 1943, the Master has this perception filter around his face, which makes the Germans believe he is one of them. He is heir of Aryan blood, and the Doctor disables the signal twits and leaves him to be captured by the Germans, who believe he is in fact a double agent for the British, thanks to a fake message Nor sent by the Doctor's request. That has got to be one of the ballsiest and meanest things the Doctor has ever done to the Master. Then again, considering what the Master did to Gallifrey, which is revealed later on, justice is served, I guess. And he doesn't die. Like I said, he lives around 70 to 80 years trying to get back to the hangar Barton had left the Glass Lady in. Before he is trapped in the Kasavan universe, will he escape? It's the Master, of course he bloody escapes, and he'll just say, I escaped, and everyone will just be like, or just turn up, and nobody will give a care. Well, actually, lots of people will care, but they probably won't get an answer. I'll quickly touch on Daniel Barton, because I realise I haven't really talked about him much. He's an effective secondary humanoid antagonist, not discounting the Kasavan, who are decent aliens, but they're really there to fuel the first half of the story, and they are important in the grand scheme of things. They're less of the focus. Barton, on the other hand, remains quite a lot of the focus throughout part 1 and a little bit into part 2, and Lenny Henry does a fantastic job. Sorry, Sir Lenny Henry does a fantastic job, and he's a really great secondary villain. That being said, he does escape with no consequences at the end, being extracted by an extraction team, probably, leaving the doors opening to him returning at some point. Well, if he's going to get away with no consequences at the end of this story, then we better see him again. Same with Jack Robertson, who does turn up again, and also avoids getting consequences. We better be building to something, Chibnall. You've got a 5-year plan. I'm expecting great things from it. Or at least big things. You've got another 3 series. You better wrap stuff up in those 3 series. Stop creating more questions. Start answering some. So, Spyfall. This is an epic 2-part opener. There is a few nitpicks here and there. And part 1 is definitely the stronger of the 2 episodes, as it's a bit more simple, whilst part 2 feels a bit more busy. But it's still a really effective series opener. I might even take it above The Woman Who Fell to Earth because it's such a great epic story, making this one of my favourite series openers. I think even if maybe there could have been a few minutes added onto each episode to maybe explain a few more things and make a few more things make sense. And these 2 episodes are 60 minutes already. They're already another 10 minutes each. So, yeah, we've got a 2-hour epic here, but could we have done with it a little bit longer? Maybe, possibly. Doctor Who Adventures did a very good video wondering whether they should have a part 3, whether Spyfall needed a 3rd episode. In my opinion, I don't think it needed another 60-minute episode or another 50-minute episode. Maybe 20, 30 minutes at most. But I think just a few things to iron out some of the kinks. Or extend these episodes by another 5 to 10 minutes each and make them 65 or 70. But I don't think they would need a full-length 50 to 60 minutes 3rd episode. The finale, on the other hand, I did think needed another episode of 50 to 60 minutes in length. But more on that when we get to that review. It'll be a very big one, I expect. If it's anything like the original review, it'll be an extremely long one. So overall, Spyfall is an epic start to this series, and is one of my favourite episodes of the 13th Doctor's era so far. I will be giving Spyfall a 9 out of 10. Story. Also, I love the fact that they use a James Bond film's title, and it's one of the more recent ones. It's Skyfall, which is in fact my favourite film of all time. So it's fantastic that they're sort of taking the name from that film and playing around with it here, as well as kind of fitting it with what the plot is. So that's it from my review of Spyfall, the epic Series 12 series opener. I did think part 1 was the stronger of the 2 episodes, but it's still a really great 2-part opener, and it's definitely the best of the 3 2-part openings of a series, of the revised series. It's better than The Impossible Astronaut Day of the Moon, and it's better than Magician's Apprentice, which is familiar, which in my opinion is the weakest of the 3. So the Series 6 one kind of comes in the middle. So that's Spyfall. Thank you so much for watching this review. Tune in next time when Ed Hine returns to write his second Doctor Who script. And you know what? After watching it Take 2 again, I kind of had a little bit more appreciation for it. Some of my issues I had on my previous viewings of that episode still stand on the latest one, but I had a bit more appreciation for what it was trying to do and for the characterization and character drama stuff it did do. So after that, I got a little bit more appreciation for Ed Hine. So let's see how his second script does on at time recording, it's going to be the 4th viewing. It will be the 4th viewing. So what will my opinions be on Series 12, Episode 3, Orphan 55? Tune in tomorrow to find out. I'll see you guys then. Goodbye. Don't forget to click below to subscribe to the Nicholas Payne YouTube channel.